"Move, you waste of space, you're nothing." The words cut through the ambient noise of the shopping mall, sharp and ugly, causing heads to turn. Jason didn't care who was watching. In fact, he seemed to thrive on the audience. He shoved past Emily, his shoulder checking hers hard enough to make her stumble, though she didn't fall. Not this time. Around them, the mundane hum of holiday shoppers died down. A cashier paused with a scanner in mid-air. A mother pulled her child closer. They were all watching the tall, arrogant man in the expensive leather jacket looming over the woman in the plain beige coat. To them, she looked small, defeated, a relic of a past he was all too happy to trample on. Jason laughed, a cold, barking sound that echoed off the polished linoleum floors. "Look at you," he sneered, turning back to face her, his phone still loosely gripped in his hand. "I figured you'd be hiding under your mother's porch by now. But here you are walking around like you actually belong among normal people. It's pathetic, Emily. You're still soft. You're still weak." Emily straightened her coat. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing didn't hitch. Years ago, this public humiliation would have sent her running to the nearest bathroom to sob until her throat burned. But the woman standing before him now was not the girl he had broken. She looked him in the eye, her expression unreadable, a calm lake that refused to ripple despite the stones he threw. "I'm not in your way, Jason," she said, her voice low but steady. "You went out of your way to find me." He scoffed, stepping into her personal space, using his height to intimidate her. "Don't flatter yourself. You're a ghost, Emily, a broke, desperate ghost who came crawling back to town because she couldn't hack it in the real world. Your sister told me everything." Empty pockets, empty life. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried enough venom to poison the air between them. "Do you know what people are whispering right now? They're pitying you. They see a woman who couldn't keep a man, couldn't keep a job, and couldn't keep her dignity." Emily held his gaze. She didn't blink. She felt a strange detachment, observing his cruelty like a scientist observing a rabid animal behind glass. He wanted her to scream. He wanted her to beg. He wanted the drama that fueled his ego. "Are you finished?" she asked. Her lack of reaction infuriated him. His face reddened, the vein in his neck pulsing. "You think you're better than me? You're nothing without me to tell you who you are." He raised his hand as if to dismiss her, to shove her again, harder this time. But his hand never made contact. Outside the glass entrance doors, the screech of tires tore through the tension. It wasn't the sound of a reckless teenager. It was the heavy, authoritative halt of precision engineering. A hush fell over the entire atrium. Through the glass, a sleek black sedan, darker than a moonless night and clearly worth more than every other car in the parking lot combined, had pulled up to the curb. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement. The doors opened in unison. 3 men stepped out. They were dressed in charcoal suits that were tailored to perfection, moving with a synchronized lethality that suggested they were not mall security nor local police. They were something else entirely. They walked through the automatic doors, the sensors parting for them as if in reverence. Jason faltered, his hand dropping to his side. He looked from the men to Emily, a flicker of confusion dampening his arrogance. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. The lead man, tall with graying temples and a face carved from granite, walked straight past Jason as if he didn't exist. He stopped directly in front of Emily and bowed his head, a gesture of profound respect that sent a shockwave through the onlookers. "Mrs. Hale," the man said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent mall. "We apologize for the delay. The car is ready." The name hung in the air. Hale. Jason's face drained of color. He took a staggering step back, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. "Mrs. What?" From the other side of the mall corridor, Emily's mother, Helen, and her sister, Clare, had just rounded the corner. They froze, clutching their shopping bags, witnessing the impossible tableau. They saw the men, they saw the car, and they saw Emily, not cowering but nodding slowly to the man in the suit. Then the rear door of the sedan opened, and he stepped out. Daniel Hale didn't just walk into a room, he changed the atmospheric pressure of it. He entered the mall with a stride that was unhurried and terrifyingly calm. He ignored the gaping shoppers. He ignored the stunned Jason. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, locked solely on Emily. He reached her side in 3 long strides, placing a hand gently on her arm, not to restrain but to anchor. "Are you hurt?" Daniel asked. His voice was soft, intimate, meant only for her, yet in the absolute silence of the mall, everyone heard the steel beneath the velvet. "I'm fine," Emily replied, her voice finally trembling, not from fear but from the relief of his presence. Daniel turned his head slowly. He looked at Jason. It wasn't a look of anger. Anger implies the other person matters. It was a look of cold, clinical assessment, the way a man might look at a cockroach before crushing it. "And you are?" Daniel asked. Jason tried to summon his bravado, but it crumbled under Daniel's gaze. We were just talking, old friends, misunderstanding, really, She looked lost. "She is not lost," Daniel said, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating with a threat that required no shouting. "She is my wife, and if you ever touch her, speak to her, or breathe in her direction again, I will dismantle your life so thoroughly you will need a manual to put it back together." Jason swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. "I didn't know. She didn't say anything." "She doesn't have to," Daniel replied. He turned back to Emily, his expression softening instantly. "Let's go home." He didn't wait for a response. He guided her toward the exit, his body shielding hers from the stairs, from Jason, from the world. The security team formed a phalanx around them, moving them toward the car. As they passed the frozen figures of Helen and Claire, Emily didn't stop. She saw Claire's face twisted in a mixture of shock and naked jealousy, and Helen's pale, trembling hands covering her mouth. Claire stepped forward, her voice shrill and desperate. "Emily, wait, what is going on?" Emily kept walking. The glass doors slid shut behind them, sealing the chaos inside. The interior of the car was a sanctuary of silence and leather. As the door clicked shut, the noise of the outside world vanished. Emily let out a breath she felt she had been holding for years. She leaned back against the seat, closing her eyes as the car pulled away smoothly. Daniel took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. He didn't push. He didn't demand an explanation. He just offered his strength. "I'm sorry I was late," he murmured, lifting her hand to kiss her knuckles. "You were right on time," she whispered, opening her eyes to look at him. "Did you see his face?" "I saw a man who just realized he's been playing with fire," Daniel said grimly. "But Emily, are you sure you want to stay at your mother's house tonight? After that, we can go to a hotel. We can fly back to the city." Emily looked out the tinted window as the familiar, dilapidated streets of her hometown rolled by. "No," she said, a new resolve hardening in her chest. "If I leave now, they win. They'll spin stories. They'll say I ran away again. I need to finish this. I need them to see me, really see me." Daniel nodded, though his jaw remained tight. "Very well, but my men stay close." "I know." When the car pulled up to the small, peeling house on Elm Street, Helen and Claire were already there, having sped home in their beat-up sedan, likely breaking several traffic laws to beat the black luxury car. They stood on the porch, looking like deer caught in headlights as Emily and Daniel exited the vehicle. Claire recovered first. She always did. Her shock was rapidly metabolizing into suspicion. She crossed her arms, her eyes darting from Daniel's bespoke suit to Emily's simple coat. "So," Claire said, her voice dripping with skepticism, "you're married to him." "Hello, Claire," Emily said, stepping onto the walkway. "This is Daniel." Daniel offered a polite, distant nod. "A pleasure." "Is it?" Claire snapped. She turned to Emily. "You show up with 2 torn bags, acting like you're destitute, letting Mom cook for you, and all this time you're, what, playing peasant? Was this a joke to you?" "It wasn't a joke," Emily said, walking up the steps. "I wanted to see my family without the money getting in the way. I wanted to see if you missed me or if you just wanted what I could give you." Helen stepped forward, her eyes wide and watery. "Emily, sweetheart, we didn't know if you had told us." "If I had told you," Emily interrupted gently, "would you have treated me better, or would you just have treated me differently?" The question hung in the damp night air. Helen looked away, unable to answer. Claire, however, sneered. "Oh, stop with the martyr act. It doesn't suit you." Claire looked Daniel up and down, her gaze predatory. "I don't buy it. Men like him don't marry girls like you, not without a reason. What is it, Emily? Did you get pregnant? Did you trick him?" "Claire," Helen gasped. Daniel stepped forward, his presence looming over the porch. "Careful," he warned, his voice low. "It's okay, Daniel," Emily said, placing a hand on his chest. She looked at her sister with pity. "I didn't trick him, Claire. He loves me. I know that's a foreign concept to you, but it's the truth." She moved past them into the house, exhausted. Daniel lingered on the porch for a second, his eyes locking with Claire's. He saw the greed there, the calculating gears turning behind her eyes. He knew with the instinct that made him a billionaire that this woman was dangerous, not because she was powerful, but because she was desperate. Inside, the house felt smaller than Emily remembered. The air was stale. She turned to Daniel. "You should go back to the hotel. The guest room here is." "I'm staying," he said firmly. "There's no room," she argued softly. "And honestly, I need to face them alone in the morning. I need to strip away the protection and let them show their true colors. If you're here, they'll just perform for you." Daniel hesitated, hating the idea of leaving her in the viper's nest. But he respected her autonomy. It was the foundation of their marriage. Fine, but I'm leaving 2 men outside. And I'm coming back at breakfast. He kissed her, a lingering, protective seal, and then walked out. As soon as the heavy front door clicked shut, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Helen was in the kitchen, nervously making tea. Claire sat at the dining table, her phone in her hand, typing furiously. She didn't look up as Emily walked in. "He's gone," Claire muttered. "Good, now we can stop pretending." "Pretending what?" Emily asked, leaning against the doorframe. Claire finally looked up, her eyes hard and shiny. "That this is real. I texted Megan. She knows people, reporters, investigators. We're going to find out who he really is and what dirt you have on him." "Why can't you just be happy for me?" Emily asked, her voice cracking slightly. "Because," Claire hissed, standing up and slamming her hands on the table. "You're the mess, Emily. You're the disaster. You don't get the fairy tale. That's not how the story goes. And if you think I'm going to let you come back here and lord this over us, you're wrong. I'm going to dig until I find the rot." Emily stared at her sister, realizing with a sinking heart that the battle hadn't ended at the mall. It had only just begun. Emily closed the door to the guest room, shutting out the toxic hum of the house, but the silence brought no relief. The air in the room was cold, smelling faintly of mothballs and neglect. She sat on the edge of the twin bed she used to sleep in as a teenager, the springs creaking under her weight. Her phone buzzed against the nightstand, the screen lighting up the dark room. It was Daniel. "Still okay?" She stared at the glowing letters, her thumb hovering over the keypad. She wanted to tell him everything about Claire's venom, about the terrifying promise to dig until she found the rot, about the way her mother looked at her like a stranger. But she couldn't. Not yet. She needed to prove to herself that she wasn't the damsel in distress anymore. She typed back a lie, simple and white. "Fine, going to rest. Call me if you wake up." She didn't sleep. The night passed in a fitful blur of shadows and floorboard creaks. Every sound from the hallway felt like a conspiracy being whispered. When the sun finally dragged itself over the horizon, gray and bleak, Emily felt older than her years. She walked into the kitchen, hoping for a moment of solitude, but Claire was already there. She was leaning against the counter, scrolling through her phone with a smirk that was far too satisfied for 7 in the morning. Helen sat at the small dinette table, stirring a cup of tea, the spoon clinking against the ceramic with a monotonous, rhythmic tink, tink, tink. "Morning," Claire chirped, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Sleep well?" "Fine," Emily muttered, moving toward the coffee pot. Claire didn't move out of her way. "You know, it's interesting," she said, not looking up from her screen. "I did a little digging last night. Your husband, Daniel Hale, he's basically a ghost. Rich, private, barely any photos online. It's almost like he's too good to be true or hiding something." Emily poured her coffee, keeping her back to her sister. "He values his privacy. In his world, anonymity is a luxury." "Convenient," Claire mused. "Very convenient for a girl who needs to reinvent herself." "Claire," Helen warned weakly from the table, "don't start." "I'm not starting anything, Mom," Claire said, her eyes finally locking onto Emily's back. "I'm just saying if Emily wants to run around claiming she's the queen of the world, she better be ready for people to ask how she got the crown. If she's lying, well, the truth has a way of coming out." Emily turned slowly, the steam from her mug rising between them. "I don't have to prove anything to you, Claire. Not my marriage, not my life, and certainly not my worth." Claire's smirk widened. "Then you won't mind when other people start asking questions." The threat was vague but heavy. Emily didn't stay to hear the rest. She grabbed her coat and walked out the back door, the screen slamming shut behind her. She needed air. She needed to be somewhere that didn't smell like resentment. She walked toward the center of town, the cold wind biting at her cheeks. The town was waking up, shops flipping their signs to open, the mundane rhythm of life continuing as if her world hadn't turned upside down. She found herself gravitating toward the small coffee shop on Main Street, a place she used to hide in during her breaks from the job she hated. She ordered a black coffee and found a secluded corner, hoping to disappear. But in a town this small, invisibility was impossible. "Emily?" The voice was hesitant. Emily looked up to see Katie, an old coworker from the diner. Katie looked tired, her apron already stained, but her eyes were kind. "Katie," Emily breathed, a genuine smile touching her lips for the first time in 24 hours. Katie didn't hesitate. She pulled Emily into a tight hug. It smelled of coffee beans and vanilla syrup, a comforting, familiar scent. "I heard you were back. The rumor mill is on fire. They say you walked in with a fleet of secret agents." Emily laughed softly, pulling away. "Just security. My husband is protective." Katie sat down opposite her, her expression sobering. "I also heard Jason made a scene. Typical." She paused, her fingers tracing the edge of the table. He hasn't changed, Emily. Actually, he's worse. He walks around like he owns the town, thinks he's some business genius because he scammed a few tourists. He accosted me at the mall, Emily admitted, looking down at her cup. He said I was nothing. Katie sighed a heavy, burdened sound. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. Look, I didn't know how to tell you back then. You were already drowning, and I didn't want to add weight to the stone, but Jason used to brag about you. Emily frowned. Brag about what? Not in a good way, Katie said, her eyes sad. He used to brag about how easy you were to manipulate. He told people, guys at the bar, customers, that he was cheating on you long before you found out. He called you his practice run until he found someone with real value. He made it a joke, Emily, like your pain was a punchline. The air left Emily's lungs. She had always known Jason was cruel, but hearing that her humiliation had been a public spectator sport for years, a joke shared over beers while she sat at home crying, twisted the knife deeper. Thank you for telling me, Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry, Katie said, reaching out to squeeze her hand. But you need to know he's not just an ex, he's a predator, and he doesn't like losing his favorite toy. Emily left the shop 10 minutes later, feeling nauseous. The town didn't feel nostalgic anymore, it felt like a trap. Every face she passed made her wonder, did you know? Did you laugh at me too? Her phone chimed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting a text from Daniel. Instead, it was a news alert. Her blood ran cold. Breaking, local woman allegedly manipulates reclusive CEO into sudden marriage. Sources claim a troubled past, financial instability, and a history of deception. Is the Hale marriage a love story or a long con? Emily's hands shook so hard she almost dropped the phone. She clicked the link. There were photos of her from the mall taken yesterday. Photos of Daniel cropped to make him look distant and cold. And quotes. Anonymous quotes from sources close to the family claiming she had a history of unstable behavior and clingy tendencies. Someone had fed them this, someone who knew her, someone who knew exactly what words would hurt the most. She dialed Daniel. He picked up on the first ring. Emily, did you see it? His voice was tight, controlled, but she could hear the fury beneath it. Yes, she whispered, leaning against a brick wall for support. We can shut this down, Daniel said immediately. My legal team is already drafting a statement. I can have that site scrubbed in an hour. No, Emily said, surprising herself. Emily, wait, she said, her voice gaining strength. If we scrub it, they'll say we're hiding the truth. I want to see how far this goes. I want to see who else crawls out of the woodwork. I need to know who is doing this. There was a long pause on the other end. It will get ugly, Daniel warned. They will attack your character. It already is ugly, she replied. But I need to know the truth. I'm here, he said simply. Whatever you decide, I'm right here. She hung up, wiping her eyes before the tears could fall. She wasn't sad anymore. She was furious. She walked back to her mother's house with a pace that was almost a run. When she burst through the front door, Claire and Helen were in the living room. The TV was on, muttering in the background. Claire jumped, her phone clutched to her chest. Emily, oh, wow, Claire stammered, her eyes darting around the room. So. That article, that's crazy, right? We had nothing to do with it. Nothing at all, Helen chimed in, nodding too fast. Terrible, just terrible. Emily stood in the archway, staring at them. She read every flicker of guilt, every nervous twitch. I see, she said, her voice eerily calm. I mean, how would they even know? Claire laughed nervously. You haven't been around in years. Maybe someone at the mall saw you and made assumptions. Maybe, Emily said. She didn't scream. She didn't accuse. She just turned and walked into the guest room, closing the door softly. Her phone buzzed again. Not a news alert this time, a text message from an unknown number. There were no words, just a photo. Emily opened it and the world stopped spinning. It was a picture of Jason and Claire, but it wasn't recent. They looked younger. Jason's hair was longer, the way he wore it when he and Emily were dating. His arm was draped possessively around Claire's waist. Claire was leaning into him, her head resting on his shoulder, a secret, intimate smile playing on her lips. Her hand rested comfortably on his chest. It was the body language of lovers. A second message popped up below the photo. You should have known, they always chose each other over you. Emily stared at the screen, the pixels burning into her retinas. The betrayal wasn't new. It wasn't a result of her returning home. It was ancient. Jason hadn't just cheated on her with strangers at a bar. He had cheated on her with her own sister. And Claire hadn't just betrayed her now. She had been betraying her from the very beginning. The noise in the house, the TV, the creaking floorboards, the murmur of voices faded into a dull roar. Emily stood up. She didn't feel the floor beneath her feet. She walked out of the room, the phone gripped in her hand like a weapon, and headed straight for the living room where the two architects of her misery sat. Emily didn't remember opening the living room door. She only remembered the sensation of the brass handle turning under her palm, cold and unforgiving, and then she was standing in the center of the room. The air was thick with the smell of Helen's potpourri and the underlying scent of stagnation. "We need to talk," Emily said. Her voice wasn't loud. It was a low, vibrating frequency that cut through the drone of the television like a diamond through glass. Claire looked up from her phone, a flicker of annoyance marring her features. She didn't look guilty, she looked interrupted. "About what now? If this is about the article I already told you." Emily didn't speak. She simply held the phone out, the screen glowing bright in the dim room. The photo of Jason and Claire, intimate, secretive, undeniable, hung between them. "Explain this." Helen squinted, leaning forward in her armchair. Is that you and Jason?" Claire's expression didn't crumble into shame. Instead, her jaw tightened and her eyes hardened into flint. Looked cornered, but arrogant enough to believe she could bite her way out. "Where did you get that?" she snapped. "It doesn't matter where I got it," Emily said, her hand steady despite the earthquake happening in her chest. "Explain why you were with him like that. Explain why his hand is on your waist while I was at home waiting for him to call." Claire scoffed, rolling her eyes as if Emily were a petulant child asking for a toy. "Oh, please, it's an old picture, Emily. Move on." "That is your explanation." Emily's voice cracked, the first fissure in her armor. "You were cheating with him while he was with me, while you were watching me cry over him. You were with him." Claire stood up, crossing her arms defensively. "You pushed him to it." The words hit Emily like a physical slap. She blinked, the room tilting slightly. "What? You heard me," Claire said, her voice rising. "You were impossible to deal with back then. You were always crying, always accusing him of things, always smothering him. He needed space. He needed someone who wasn't a nervous wreck. What did you expect him to do?" Emily felt the breath leave her lungs. She turned to her mother, desperate for one person in this house to tether her to reality. "Mom, you didn't know about this." Helen looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting the hem of her cardigan. I thought they were just friends, Emily. Jason said he needed someone to talk to because you were going through a lot." "You believed her." Emily whispered. "You believed him." Helen didn't answer. Her silence was a deafening confirmation. "Jason didn't cheat because I pushed him," Emily said, the realization settling over her like ice water. "He cheated because he wanted to, and you helped him. You let him into this house. You let him turn you against me." "You're not a victim, Emily," Claire shouted, stepping between Emily and their mother. "Stop acting like one. It's always the same with you." Poor Emily, everyone hurts Emily. "Maybe look at what you did to drive people away." "I loved you," Emily said, her voice trembling. "Both of you, and you chose him." "We chose survival," Claire spat. Helen stood up slowly, her face pale. "Emily, sweetheart, you have to understand. Jason, he told us things. He said you were unstable. He said he didn't feel safe around you. He told us you needed space and that if we kept our distance, you would get better." Emily stared at her mother. "What things? What are you talking about?" Helen's eyes dropped to the floor. "He said you had angry episodes, that you threatened him. He said he was scared of you." "And you believed that?" Emily asked, horrified. "He was very convincing," Helen whispered. "And he offered to help with the bills. He said he wanted to make sure we were taken care of while you sorted yourself out." The room went deadly silent. "Money," Emily choked out. He paid you to stay away from me." "It wasn't like that," Helen pleaded. "It was exactly like that," Emily said, her voice regaining its steel. "He bought your loyalty, and you sold me for what? For rent money? For a new TV? You weren't stable back then," Claire interjected, shielding Helen. "Jason said he needed protection from you, and yeah, we needed the help. So what? We did what we had to do. You were a mess, Emily. You were drowning, and we weren't going to let you pull us down, too." "I wasn't drowning," Emily said, her voice hollow. "I was being held under." Before Claire could respond, Emily's phone buzzed in her hand. Then again and again. A cascade of notifications. She looked down. It was a video file sent from a blocked number, but the caption was already spreading across social media. "She's been unstable for years. Her husband deserves the truth." Emily tapped the play button. On the screen, a younger version of herself appeared. She was standing in the rain outside Jason's apartment, mascara running down her face, her hair plastered to her skull. She was begging. "Please, Jason, just tell me the truth. Where were you?" Her voice on the video was shrill, desperate, the sound of a woman pushed to the brink of sanity. Jason was behind the camera, filming her, his voice calm and mocking. "You're crazy, Em. Go home. You're scaring the neighbors." He had filmed her. He had provoked her, pushed her until she broke, and then filmed the aftermath to keep as ammunition. Claire leaned forward, peering at the screen. "Oh," she said, wincing with feigned sympathy. "That's not a good look, Emily. Honestly, you look exactly how you acted, overdramatic." "You knew," Emily whispered, looking up at her sister with horror. "You knew he recorded me." I didn't tell him to, Claire shrugged. But, well, the camera doesn't lie. My image, Emily asked, staring at them. Is that all you care about? Not that he abused me, not that he gaslit me for years. We just don't want to be embarrassed, Helen murmured. Emily felt the room closing in. The walls were suffocating her. She couldn't breathe the same air as these people anymore. She turned and walked out the front door, ignoring Claire calling her name. She didn't stop until she was down the block, sitting on the curb of a cracked sidewalk, her head in her hands. She wasn't crying. She was vibrating with a mixture of rage and grief so potent it felt like poison. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel, Emily, where are you? I saw the video, I'm coming. She typed back, her fingers stiff. No, I need a minute, please. She couldn't face him, not while she felt this dirty, this exposed. She sat there, staring at the asphalt, trying to remember how to breathe. Then another notification, a different sound. Alert, new inquiry on your credit report. Alert, delinquent account notice. Emily frowned. She opened the banking app she hadn't looked at in years, the one linked to her old identity, her old life. Her breath hitched. There were credit cards opened in her name, 3 of them, all maxed out. Loans taken out 2 years ago, 4 years ago. The debt was staggering, thousands upon thousands of dollars. She clicked on the details. The billing address was her mother's house. The recovery email was Claire's. It wasn't just identity theft. It was financial cannibalism. They had used her social security number, her name, her absence, to fund their lives while she was gone. They hadn't just sold her out emotionally, they had mortgaged her future. Daniel, she whispered to the empty street. She needed him. She needed to tell him, but before she could dial, another message came through. This one was a screenshot, forwarded from a number she didn't recognize. It was a text conversation. Sender, Megan. Recipient, Claire. Megan, I'll send everything I know. The tabloid is paying double for the unstable ex angle. They want dirt on the husband, too. Claire, good, she's hiding something. Send the photos from the bachelorette party, the ones where she looks drunk. Megan, done, just make sure I get my cut. Emily stared at the name. Megan, her best friend. The one person she had texted last night. The one person who had hugged her in the coffee shop and warned her about Jason. Betrayal wasn't a wave, it was an ocean, and she was at the bottom of it. She dialed Megan's number. It rang twice. Hey girl, you okay? Megan's voice was chirpy fake. You sold me, Emily said. Her voice was dead flat. There was a pause. What, Emily? I saw the texts, Emily cut her off. You sold my photos, you sold my secrets, for what, a few $100s? It wasn't like that. Megan's voice pitched up, defensive. Claire said the reporter already knew most of it. I have rent to pay, Emily. You married a billionaire. You don't need the reputation, but I need the cash. We're done, Emily said. Don't ever contact me again. She hung up and blocked the number. She sat on the curb, the cold seeping through her coat. She felt hollowed out, scraped clean of any illusion that she had a home here. Her family had sold her for comfort. Her friend had sold her for cash. Her ex had sold her for clout. She was entirely alone, or so they thought. Emily stood up. She wiped her face, though there were no tears to wipe. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They thought she was the same girl who had begged in the rain. They thought they could strip her down to nothing and she would thank them for leaving her the bones. They were wrong. She picked up her phone and dialed Daniel. I'm ready, she said. Emily stood on the cracked pavement, the phone pressed to her ear, the silence on the other end of the line heavier than the leaden sky above. She had told Daniel she was ready, but she hadn't told him what she was ready for. Before she could take another step toward the sanctuary of his arriving car, a shadow detached itself from the gloom of a nearby alleyway. Rough day. The voice was smooth, confident, and curdle-inducing. Emily froze. Jason stepped into the pool of yellow light cast by the street lamp. He looked entirely too pleased with himself, his posture relaxed, a predator who believes the trap has already snapped shut. Get away from me, Emily said, her voice low. Jason chuckled, shaking his head. Always so dramatic. I'm just giving you a heads up, Em, professional courtesy. Your husband is going to be very disappointed in you very soon. There is no truth you can use against me, Emily replied, her grip tightening on her phone. You used my credit, you used my family, but you don't have me. Oh, sweetheart, Jason murmured, reaching into the inner pocket of his jacket. There's always something. He pulled out a folded document, crisp and white against the gray evening. With a flick of his wrist, he opened it and held it out for her to see. You might want to take a look at this before he does. Emily's eyes scanned the paper. It looked official, Hale Corporation, letterhead, bank, routing numbers, legal jargon, but it was the bottom of the page that made her heart stop. There in blue ink was her signature, not the way she signed things now, but the way she used to sign them years ago, the loop of the Y, the sharp crossing of the T. What is this? She whispered. A transfer authorization, Jason explained, his smile widening. From a Hale Corporation holding account directly to a shell company linked to, well, to me, but it looks like you authorized it. That's insane, Emily stammered. I've never had access to his accounts. I've never even been to his office headquarters. No one will believe this. That's what makes this fun, Jason said softly, stepping closer until she could smell his cologne, too sweet, too strong. Daniel's board won't care if you say it's forged. A signature is a signature, and with the news stories already painting you as a gold-digging, unstable woman with a history of deception, this is just the final nail. They'll see a desperate woman trying to cash out. Daniel won't believe it, she said, though a cold spike of fear pierced her chest. Everyone protects their own reputation when the fire gets close, Jason countered. I'm sending a copy to his board of directors tonight, unless, of course, you leave. Tonight, alone. He tucked the paper back into his jacket. Tick-tock, Emily. He turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner with a whistle. Emily stood trembling, the street lamp buzzing overhead. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers numb. She hit redial. Daniel, she choked out the moment he answered. I'm 3 minutes away, his voice came through, steady and calm. What happened? He's trying to frame me, she said, the words tumbling out. Jason showed me a document. Forged my signature. It says I stole money from your company. He says he's going to send it to your board. There was a pause. In that silence, Emily's greatest fear bloomed, that he would hesitate, that he would ask if it was true, that he would wonder just for a second if the unstable girl from the tabloids was capable of theft. I believe you, Daniel said. The air rushed back into her lungs. You haven't even seen it. I don't need to, Daniel replied, his voice hardening into granite. You didn't do this. I know who you are, Emily, and I know who he is. He thinks you'll choose the company over me. I choose you, Daniel said, the conviction in his tone absolute. Always. Minutes later, the black sedan screeched to a halt at the curb. Daniel was out of the car before the engine died, moving with a focused intensity that made the security detail scramble to keep up. He reached her, his hands cupping her face, searching her eyes for damage. Show me, he commanded gently. Emily pulled up the photo she had managed to snap of the document as Jason was putting it away. Daniel studied the image on her screen. His jaw tightened, a muscle feathering near his ear. I know this, he said finally. You know the forgery? I know the style, Daniel corrected. Jason pitched a proposal to my acquisitions team 5 years ago. He tried to use a fake endorsement from a silent partner to get his foot in the door. He was blacklisted for it. The handwriting, the formatting, the fake routing numbers, it's his signature move. Literally. He looked at Emily, his eyes softening. He thinks he's holding a smoking gun, but he just handed us the bullets. He just proved intent to defraud. What do we do? Emily asked. We finish it, Daniel said. We go back to the house, we get the rest of the evidence, and we end this. The drive back to her mother's house was short, but it felt like a march to war. When they walked through the front door, the atmosphere inside was brittle. Helen was sitting on the sofa, her face buried in a tissue. Claire was pacing, looking like a trapped animal. When she saw Daniel, Claire stopped pacing. You can't just barge in here, she snapped, though her voice lacked its usual bite. This is our home. This is a crime scene, Daniel said coolly, placing a heavy folder on the coffee table. Or at least the planning ground for several. Helen looked up, her eyes red. What are you talking about? The financial papers, Daniel said. The payments from Jason, the credit cards opened in Emily's name, the loans. Claire stepped forward, her face flushing. You can't prove any of that. I don't have to prove it to you, Daniel said. I have the bank records, I have the IP addresses used to open the accounts, and I have the text logs. He opened the folder. It wasn't just a few papers, it was a dossier. He pulled out a sheet and laid it on the table. Your conversations weren't as encrypted as you thought, Daniel said, looking directly at Claire. We have the transcripts. Helen gasped, reaching for the paper. She read the first few lines and her hand flew to her mouth. Claire, you told him to do it? Claire froze. The paper on the table was a printout of a text thread from 3 years ago. Jason, she's annoying me. I need an out. Claire, just say she's crazy. Cut her off. I'll back you up. Just make sure the check clears. You were the architect, Emily whispered, staring at her sister. It wasn't just Jason. You told him how to hurt me. Claire shook her head violently, backing away. No, he manipulated me too. I was just trying to survive. You weren't surviving, Daniel said, his voice ice cold. You were profiting. Why? Emily asked, her voice breaking. Why hate me this much? Claire's face twisted, the mask finally falling away completely. Because you always had the potential to leave. She screamed. You were the pretty one, the smart one, the one who was going to get out of this town. I wanted what you had, and when you came back with him, it wasn't fair. You wanted Daniel, Emily realized aloud. That's why you tried to destroy my reputation. You thought if I was out of the way, I would have been a better wife for a man like him, Claire shouted, tears of rage streaming down her face. I'm strong. I do what needs to be done. You're just a weeping willow. You're not strong, Daniel said, stepping between Emily and her sister. You're cruel, and cruelty is the weapon of the weak. The room fell into a stunned silence. Helen was sobbing quietly. Claire was panting, her chest heaving with the exertion of her confession. Emily stood still, feeling the final tether to her family snap. It didn't hurt. It felt like liberation. But the night wasn't over. Outside, headlights swept across the living room window, blindingly bright. Tires crunched on the gravel driveway, followed by the slam of a car door. The front door flew open. Jason stood there. He looked disheveled, frantic, his earlier confidence replaced by the mania of a man whose plan was unraveling. He ignored the security guards outside who were closing in. He marched into the living room, his eyes wild. "We need to talk," he barked, pointing a shaking finger at Emily. "Alone." Daniel didn't move. He didn't even flinch. He simply squared his shoulders, blocking Jason's path to his wife. "You won't be speaking to her alone," Daniel said, "or ever again. You think you can control this?" Jason laughed, but the sound was thin, shaking at the edges like a sheet of glass about to shatter. He looked around the room, his eyes darting from the weeping Helen to the pale Clare and finally resting on Emily. "You think she'll be clean when the truth comes out? I'll drag her name through so much mud she'll never be clean again." Emily met his gaze. She didn't step back. She didn't flinch. "The truth already came out, Jason. Yours is coming next." Jason's smile faltered, his bravado slipping like a mask that didn't fit anymore. "What do you think you know? You have nothing but a rich husband and a bad reputation." Daniel didn't speak. He simply opened the thick dossier he held in his hand. The sound of the heavy paper turning was the only noise in the room. He extracted a single sheet and held it up. "We have everything," Daniel said, his voice terrifyingly level. "This is security footage from the mall, not just the incident where you shoved her. We have footage of you cornering her in the parking lot. We have audio from the security cameras of you threatening to ruin her." Jason's face drained of color, his skin taking on a sickly, waxen hue. "That means nothing. People say things when they're angry. We also have this," Daniel continued, pulling another document, a transcript. "Phone records. Calls made from your number to the Daily Standard tabloid. We have the wire transfer records from your account to the reporter's personal Venmo. We have the timestamps of when you sent the forged transfer authorization to my board." Jason swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing convulsively. "You can't prove intent. I was confused. I thought the transfer was real." "And this," Daniel said, ignoring him and pulling out the final, damning piece of evidence. "This is the metadata from the file. It shows the document was created on your laptop, signed with a stylus registered to your IP address, and drafted 3 hours before you showed it to Emily." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hovering at the top of its track. Jason stepped back, his hands trembling violently. He looked at the papers, then at Daniel, and finally, desperately, at Clare. The realization hit him. There was no way out. The walls he had built to trap Emily were collapsing on top of him. "You think you can pin this all on me?" he snarled, his voice rising to a shriek. He pointed a shaking finger at Clare. "She helped. She told me to send the documents. She told me it would ruin Emily so she could swoop in." Clare's denial was instant and screeching. "You liar," she screamed, stepping away from him as if he were contagious. "I never told you to forge anything. That was your idea. You said you wanted to get paid." "You were the one who wanted her gone," Jason shouted back, sweat pouring down his face. "You said Daniel would notice you if she was out of the picture. You said she was weak." "You're twisting everything," Clare cried, looking at Daniel with wide, panicked eyes. "He's lying. He's trying to drag me down with him." Emily watched them. She watched the two people who had made her life a misery for years turn on each other like starving rats in a sinking ship. There was no loyalty here. There was no love. There was only greed and fear. "It's over," Daniel said. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He simply nodded to the doorway. 2 of the security guards stepped into the room. They moved with professional efficiency, closing the space between themselves and Jason. "Mr. Hale," one of them said, acknowledging Daniel. "Get him out of my sight," Daniel ordered. "The police are waiting at the end of the driveway." Jason's eyes went wide. Panic took over. He lunged toward Emily, his hands reaching out as if to grab her, to hurt her, to make her feel one last moment of fear. "You did this," he screamed. "You turned them against me." But he never reached her. The guards intercepted him mid-stride, pinning his arms behind his back with practiced ease. Jason thrashed, kicking at the furniture, spitting curses. Wait, this isn't over, he howled as they dragged him toward the door. She's nothing, you hear me? She's nothing. Emily didn't look away. She watched him until he was hauled out the door, his voice fading into the night air, reduced to nothing more than background noise. The heavy front door slammed shut, sealing the house in a sudden, ringing quiet. Helen collapsed onto the porch steps just outside the door, her sobbing loud and jagged. Claire stood by the fireplace, shivering, her arms wrapped around herself, stripped of her arrogance. Emily looked at her mother. She saw a woman who was broken, yes, but who had also allowed the breaking of her daughter. Emily, Helen choked out, looking up with tear-filled eyes. I'm so sorry, I didn't know it would go this far, I just wanted peace. You didn't want peace, Mom, Emily said, her voice soft but unyielding. You wanted comfort, you chose to believe him because he paid you, you chose money over me. Helen sobbed harder, burying her face in her hands, but Emily felt no urge to comfort her. The cord had been cut. Claire wiped her face, smearing mascara across her cheeks. She looked small now. Emily, she whispered, I didn't mean for him to get arrested, I wanted something of my own. I felt like you always had everything, even when you had nothing. I had nothing because you took it, Emily said. I barely survived this town, and you still tried to take the little dignity I had left. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Claire said, her voice hollow. No, Emily agreed. You don't. She turned to Daniel. He was watching her, pride radiating from him. He offered his hand, not to pull her, but to walk with her. What do you want to do? He asked. Emily looked around the living room one last time. She looked at the faded wallpaper, the dust motes dancing in the lamp light, the family that had become strangers. I'm done here, she said. I'm choosing myself now, and I can't do that here. She walked out the front door and down the porch steps. She didn't look back at her mother weeping on the stairs. She didn't look back at her sister trembling in the hallway. She walked toward the gate, the cold night air feeling like the freshest breath she had ever taken. The lawyers have everything, she asked Daniel as they reached the end of the walkway. Fraud, identity theft, blackmail, extortion, Daniel listed. It's all ready, they won't bother you again. Good. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, the world exploded into light. Reporters had gathered. News of Jason's arrest and the involvement of a billionaire's wife had spread like wildfire. Cameras flashed, blinding and rapid. Microphones were thrust over the police barricade. Voices shouted over one another. Emily, did you know about the fraud? Mrs. Hale, is it true your sister was involved? How do you feel about the betrayal? Are you afraid more secrets will come out? Daniel moved to shield her, raising his hand to block the glare, but Emily stopped him. She gently lowered his hand. She didn't shrink, she didn't hide. She stepped forward, finding a space between the microphones where the light hit her face. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and looked directly into the lenses of the cameras. The truth came out, she said, her voice clear and carrying over the crowd. And that is enough. One reporter, a young woman near the front, shouted a question that cut through the noise. Emily, what have you learned from all of this? What do you say to the people who called you weak? The crowd quieted, waiting for the soundbite. Emily paused. She looked at Daniel, who stood beside her, a partner, not a savior. Then she looked back at the cameras. I learned that cruelty is loud, she said, her voice steady. It is greedy and it is desperate, but self-respect is quiet. It doesn't need to shout to be heard. And people who mistake silence for weakness usually learn the truth too late. The reporters fell silent, the shutters of the cameras the only sound clicking away like a chorus of applause. Daniel opened the car door for her. Emily slid inside, the leather seat cool against her back. Daniel got in beside her and the heavy door thudded shut, sealing out the noise, the flashbulbs, and the past. Ready? Daniel asked, taking her hand. Emily looked out the window as the car began to move. She watched her childhood home disappear into the darkness, shrinking until it was nothing more than a speck in the rearview mirror. Yes, she said, squeezing his hand. I'm ready to go home. The car accelerated, merging onto the highway, driving away from the shadows and into the wide, open future.